death can seem a more nebulous concept in a high magic setting such as Dungeons and Dragons. What's there to worry about when anyone can simply be resurrected whenever needed? Of course, that is only true for the many epic heroes who inhabit the world. For the lowly commoner, resurrection is as lofty a goal as becoming a noble or ascending to godhood. This distinction is especially true in Baldur's Gate 3, which is hard-coded into its rule set that only the main characters can be resurrected. Indeed, the companions in the game are almost more heroic for this very reason. If one dies in battle, they cannot be resurrected, which means they are really and truly dead. So I'd like to take a moment to remember the companions who died before their time during my adventure through the world of Toril, in the order in which they departed. Perhaps with better foresight, their deaths could have been avoided. Owlbear Mother was not a companion. However, her death is still regrettable and seems like it could have been avoided. Died defending her cub. Alfira, the tiefling bard. We bonded over a shared love of music, and even she joined our camp. Your death was unavoidable, but still regrettable. Unintentionally murdered by Andi, for story reasons. Wulburn, friend of Barkus Brute. We promised Barkus we would free you from the Moonrise Towers. Unfortunately, you were dead before we even got there. The Harpers. There were many of you during the storm of Moonrise Towers, and you all had names. I'm fairly sure many of you died during the battle, though I can't say who or how many. Hope. We freed you from captivity in Raphael's hell prison. Died during the battle with Raphael. Owlbear Cub. We took you in after orphaning you, and you volunteered to fight in the final battle against the Red Dragon. Died fighting the Red Dragon. Zevlor, the tiefling guy from the beginning of the game. You had a whole thing going on with the tieflings. I don't know all the details. I do know that you redeemed yourself in the final battle. Died fighting the Red Dragon. I played Baldur's Gate 3 on a Mac computer using the crossover emulator on high graphics. The game worked fairly well, though it did have some frame dropping issues during the real-time rendered cutscenes. I don't recommend going down to medium graphics, as the game looks significantly worse. The high graphics setting was pretty good. I won't focus on the graphics though, as I wasn't playing the game on the highest settings and on a native system. That being said, the visuals in the game were very good. However, there were some issues as well. The landscapes and dungeons were all beautifully realized, a significant improvement on previous games in the series, which hailed from back in the day of 2D isometric graphics. However, due to the camera angle always looking down on the characters, it was difficult to be able to really appreciate the views as they were made. Even panning the game camera all the way down only gives a partial landscape. The ground containing more than half of the frame, no matter where the camera stands. Graphics look good, but you just can't get a good look at them, so they always fall short. I'd like the ability to view the world from the character's perspective, so there would be a lot to appreciate if only it was visible. Character sprites are all detailed, and your armor and clothing choices all carry over into the cutscenes as well, thanks to the real-time rendering. Cutscenes are all entertaining to watch with great voice acting and character animations, if not perfectly implemented. There is full nudity in the game for all the main characters, an interesting choice which Larian was able to do due to the unique circumstances around their funding. The player can choose whether characters appear in their ordinary clothes or their armor without affecting the game stats. They can also choose to not show the helmets so you can actually see their faces, something that always bothers me in RPGs. It all does add to the immersion of the storytelling. An interesting issue, which I'm sure was a big design challenge for Larian Studios, was translating the original games into a 3D world. The 2D games did not look as good, the character sprites never got in the way of the gameplay, and the maps were always clearly defined. In translating the game into a 3D space, there were some issues with targeting, which emerged. Characters frequently got in the way of gameplay, making it impossible to target certain spots on the map, which can be a big deal when trying, for instance, to specifically place a fireball in a tactical location. Another emergent issue seems to be character targeting. Because some battles happened in a multi-story setting, which makes perfect sense from a 3D perspective, there were issues with targeting. In one battle, I tried to have my characters take cover in the floor above the enemies, only to find that they started firing straight through the concrete floor at me. Larian has done a great job of bringing the Baldur's Gate games to life in a modern way. However, the visuals did tend to get in the way of the gameplay in many instances, which can add to frustration in an already often frustrating game. I give the visuals an 8.5 out of 10. In many games, narrative can neatly be dissected from gameplay. However, in Dungeons & Dragons, narrative is a focal point of the gameplay, offering the player multiple layers of options regarding how to proceed. What you wind up with, in essence, is that some players will have a completely different experience than other players, as the game follows a branching, choose-your-own-adventure style of play. Oftentimes, the player will make a narrative choice without even realizing it's happening, setting them off on a different course than they may have originally anticipated. This can be a blessing and a curse, as are so many other aspects of this game. Oftentimes, the narrative choices will come in the form of vague dialogue options, the result of which will only be determined after you select one. It's a fun mechanic, however, if the player is trying to achieve a specific result, it can be very frustrating to try to get where you want to go. I ended up looking up the result of many interactions ahead of time, simply because if the dialogue goes the wrong way, you'll end up being forced to kill the main characters and mess up whatever plotline you're going for. At its core, it's a lot of fun to have all the options. However, buyer beware, Larian is not a forgiving storyteller, and the game is honestly pretty psychotic in many instances, which can be entertaining or frustrating, depending on what kind of story you're looking for. Don't get me wrong, even when the Baldur's Gate games were written by their original studio, BioWare, the game certainly had a morbid and grotesque streak, but nothing like what you'll be offered in Baldur's Gate 3. It certainly earns its M maturity rating for mature audiences only. Here's a run-through of my playthrough. If you don't want spoilers, skip ahead to the gameplay section. I chose the Dark Urge background for my character, a halfling storm sorcerer named Andi Andonopolis. The Dark Urge background is actually the same background as in the original games, though much more murdery and insane in this instance. The game begins with a Mind Flayer ship crash landing near the city of Baldur's Gate. You find that your character has been infected with a Mind Flayer parasite, normally fatal, however, not in your case. Around the crash site, the player meets some other survivors with similar circumstances. The reptilian astral warrior Gith girl Lae'zel, the half-elf cleric with a dark past, Shadowheart, who holds a mysterious artifact which talks to the group and apparently protects them from the parasite's worst mind control effects. More on that later. The quirky, human wizard Gale, who claims to have hooked up with a goddess, Mystra, goddess of magic. We didn't really need another arcane spellcaster, so I reclassed Gale into a paladin. The vampiric elf rogue Asterion, the white knight human warlock hero with a pact with the devil named Zora, Will. I reclassed Will into an alternate rogue, Gloomstalker Ranger Fighter multiclass because we didn't need a warlock. And Karlach, the tiefling barbarian from Hell, with a heart of gold. Near the crash site, we meet a colony of druids who have been beset by a band of refugee tieflings fleeing from the warlike goblin horde who have taken up camp nearby and worship a mysterious new god named the Absolute. The druids are not happy with the refugee situation and are considering performing a druidic ceremony which will close themselves off to the outside world permanently. Their leader, Halsin, has gone missing during an investigative mission into the goblins. Tensions are high and the heroes are asked to help find Halsin, which they agree to in the hopes that the druids can help them remove the mind flayer parasites from their brains. If the team is able to remove the leaders of the goblin camp, tieflings will be able to head to Baldur's Gate and leave the druids alone. Lae'zel has her own ideas of how to remove the parasites, and claims a group of Gith are not far away and suggests the team find that Gith camp in order to do so. It is here also that the group meets a mysterious undead named Wizards, who takes up camp with the heroes. The team raids a goblin camp and finds the druid Halsin. Together, the group fights their way through the goblin camp. We end up killing pretty much everyone in the fortress. Apparently, if the player decides to work with the goblins, they could recruit one of the three leaders, Minthara, a drow elf paladin. However, this is at the risk of alienating the druids, so I didn't do it, and I killed Minthara and the other leaders. Over the course of the story arc, the players also learn that they are not the only ones infected with parasites. There seems to be many others who have the mind flayer parasites, and they all seem to worship the mysterious Absolute. The heroes return to the druid camp. The interim leader is cast down by Halsin. Apparently she was working with the shadow druids and was sabotaging the camp. That evening, there is much celebration. It is at this point in the game that romance options become available to the player. I have some issues with how this mechanic was implemented, but I'll get more into that later. Suffice to say, the game needs some kind of a Tinder filter, because it is annoying to have to deal with the advances of every single character in the game. They all decide it's open game on the hero and come at you like a pack of wild animals, irrespective of gender or sexual preferences, and will continue to do so throughout the game, if you even think of getting off subject with one of them. A core mechanic of the game is the long rests, during which the characters set up the camp and sleep through the evening. This is also when certain character interactions happen, including when you get visitations from your dream guardian, inhabitant of the astral plane who is protecting the player from the mind flayers with the power of the artifact. It is also during these interludes where the player's background comes into play. In one evening, we were joined by a jovial bard Elphira, who wants to help in our journey. The next morning, she was found dead in the campsite. Apparently, my dark urge blood rage got the better of me during the evening, and I killed her. Another night, we are joined by Sceleritas Fel, a demonic servant who has the same connection to the mysterious past, which I chose as a background. The druids have no solution for the parasite. However, over the course of raiding the goblin camp, the players learn of the Moonrise Towers, where it seems the parasites are being implanted. Halsin has some knowledge of the towers, having fought their leader in the past, Ketheric Thorm, and decides to join the group. Before going to Moonrise, we stopped off at Lae'zel's Gith camp. They were unsuccessful at removing the parasites, but they did decide to kill us, so we had to kill nearly all of them as well. At this point, there aren't going to be many people left in Faerun once we actually do save the realm. Before leaving, we met up with Vlaakith, the undead Lich Queen of the Gith, who had no problem with our earlier murders. It seems the Gith actually like that kind of thing. Vlaakith wants the group to travel to the astral plane and kill the Dream Guardian, who apparently is a threat to the Gith Empire. We decided not to do that and had to kill the few remaining Gith who had been secretly waiting for us in ambush, ready to kill us regardless of how our interaction with the Dream Guardian went. We had two options for getting to Moonrise. Either travel through the mountain pass, which is cursed and progress would be difficult, or underground in the Underdark. We went through the Underdark, met some mushroom people named Myconids, and some deep underground dwarves called Durgar, and eventually we re-emerged on the surface near Moonrise Tower, ending Act 1. Act 2 is relatively short, with only one overland map, though the Shar Temple is big enough to be an overland map on its own. Here, we met the Harpers, a vigilante group led by Jaheira, a druid from the old games. Though it's been 100 years since the previous title, Jaheira is an elf and a druid, so the years have treated her well, though she does show some visible signs of aging. Much of the Cursed Lands are inhabited by undead shades and skeletons, etc., and covered with a cursed mist which can hurt the player if they get caught away from the light. It seems Ketheric Thorm is an undead, and he leads an army of the undead. It is here we found an important temple to Shar, Shadowheart's temple, where we met Yurgir, a devil who is an enemy of another devil we met along the way, Raphael. We were tasked with killing Yurgir for Raphael, and did that so that Raphael would reveal some important information about Astarion's past. He told us that Astarion's vampire lord was planning a vampiric ceremony wherein he would kill 7,000 vampires and ascend to a new form of vampire. In the depths of the temple, Shadowheart learns her cult is holding an angelic Aasimar captive. In order to continue the romance with Shadowheart, the player must convince her to give up her religion. So, we freed the angel, and Shadowheart gave up her worship of the goddess of loss and pain, Shar, turning instead to the rival goddess of the moon, Selûne. We finished up with the Sharites, for now, and turned our attention to Moonrise Towers. We stormed the tower with the help of the Harpers and Jaheira. During our fight with Ketheric Thorm, we learned he has joined forces with the Mind Flayers, and he escapes underground where a Mind Flayer colony has taken hold. In the colony, Will's devil patron is being held captive and released from Azora in return for Will's achieving his freedom from the contract which binds him. Our fight concluded with the help of the angel we freed, Dame Aelin. It turns out Ketheric Thorm is a holy avatar to the god of death, Mirkul. What's more, he's working with two accomplices in Baldur's Gate, Orin and Lord Gortash, who have also their own godly allies, the god of murder, Baal, and the god of tyranny, Bane. The three together have enslaved an Elderbrain, leader of the Mind Flayers. After defeating the Lord of Murder's holy avatar, the curse on the lands was lifted, and we departed for Baldur's Gate, with Jaheira by our side, reclassed as a monk who wears heavy metal armor. Beginning Act 3. In Baldur's Gate, the various character story arcs come to a conclusion. We fought Shadowheart's old temple and freed her parents from captivity. We fought Astarion's vampire lord. Astarion ascended instead. We saved Will's dad from the Mind Flayer enslavement, the Duke and leader of Baldur's Gate, Duke Ravengard. We also found Minsc here, another character from the old games, a human ranger operating under the name the Stone Lord. Minsc apparently turned to stone and then recently turned back to human form, and therefore has not aged since the last game. We freed Minsc from the Elderbrain's influence, and he joined the group. We didn't need another ranger, so we reclassed him as Bard. Our dream guardian revealed that he is not actually a person but a mind flayer named the Emperor, who is at war with the others of his kind. An ancient hero of the Gift people, Orpheus, is being held captive by the Emperor on the astral plane. It is actually Orpheus's powers which allows the Emperor to resist the influence of the Elderbrain. Our dream visitations become more erratic. The Emperor reveals that he used to live in Baldur's Gate, and the Mind Flayer also begins to hit on the player here. As it is clear that the Emperor is abusing his power, I decided to free Orpheus from his astral prison. In order to do this, we needed to descend into the Hells to steal the Orphic Hammer from Raphael's home. At the House of Hope, we met another extraplanar prisoner, Hope, who aids us in our mission. We freed Hope from her prison, but on the way out we were confronted by Raphael. Raphael summons Yurgir to the battle, however Yurgir is impressed by our previous encounter and decides to aid us against Raphael. Hope died in the battle, and we were forced to use Shadowheart's one use of divine intervention, but managed to escape the House of Hope with the Orphic Hammer. Duke Ravengard told us about a bronze dragon, Ansur, who lays in wait beneath the city, ready to protect against invasion. We found the dragon's lair. Unfortunately, the dragon is already dead. However, it still has some undead sentience and becomes aware of the Emperor in our minds. The Mind Flayer and the dragon apparently used to be in a relationship, and now there is bad blood between them, so the undead dragon decided to attack us. We were forced to slay the savior of Baldur's Gate. Upon hearing about this, the Duke offers Will the dukedom, which he turns down for a life of adventure. During our stay at Baldur's Gate, we were met with both Lord Gortash and Orin. Lord Gortash is an upstart lord who has seized power in the city with the aid of robotic servants to keep the peace. He wants the group to kill Orin and take her netherstone, so that together we can rule over the Elder Brain of Baldur's Gate. Orin, on the other hand, wants us to kill Lord Gortash. Apparently Orin is my sister, and also apparently before this whole escapade, I was the Lord of Murder, Baal's chosen avatar. Orin seized control. She wants me to take the stone from Gortash, and then we can have a bloody battle together for all the marbles. We destroyed the facility which controls the robots, descended into the sewers where the secret temple of Baal lays, and I fought a one-on-one battle against Orin. Baal, the Lord of Murder, in the form of Skeleritos Fel, was impressed by my work and offered for me to regain my position as his avatar. However, I found out that if I were to accept, Jaheira and Miz would leave the group and they would attack me. I decided not to accept, and the Lord of Murder's offer was denied. He killed me. I was resurrected by Withers, who allowed me to live a new life free from my Dark Urge heritage, due to the heroic deeds I did. We then assaulted Gortash's home and got his netherstone as well. With the 3 netherstones assembled, we had everything we needed to take on the Elder Brain. We fought the Elder Brain in the sewers, however, it was too strong. We were saved by the Emperor and retreated to the astral plane. There, we told the Emperor that we wanted to free Orpheus from his prison. The Emperor did not like this, and he decided to side with the Elder Brain. We freed Orpheus, and learned that in order to control the Elder Brain with the Netherstones, Orpheus, the hero of the Gift People, would need to become a Mind Flayer. So he does this. We storm the Upper City, and with the help of all the friends we made along the way, managed to enter the final battle with the Elder Brain, the Emperor, and a red dragon. In the end, we parted ways. Gale decides to scour the bottom of the ocean in search of the Crown of Karsus, a magical device which was used to control the Elder Brain. With its power, he believes he can ascend to godhood. Lae'zel returns to her people to spread the word of Orpheus. Unfortunately, Karlach is still dying due to her heart condition. Will, Onde, and Karlach decide to descend into the depths of Avernus in order to find a way to thwart the Devil Zariel and cleanse Karlach. It's a fun story, and there are plenty of areas which I did not manage to go to during my playthrough, most notably the temple near the Gift Camp, and I also did not meet the Kuo-Toa in the Underdark. The Dark Urge background is a completely batshit crazy background. Throughout the game, the narrator continuously urges the player to murder random people. The romances are a fun addition to the game, which were not present in previous titles. However, this particular part of the game is skewed heavily in favor of girls. There are 8 romanceable champions in the game, not including the Emperor. The girls get 4 relatively normal guys, however, there is only one viable girl option if you don't side with the goblins and collect Minthara into your group. Lae'zel is insane and will literally beat you if you get into a sexual encounter with her. The characters are way too sexually aggressive, and they will all try to get the player into a romantic encounter if you ever try to talk to them about anything. I stopped talking to the characters because that's literally all they do. If the game creators want to make a fun romantic experience, they should have offered the player to state their preferences, because it's actually far too much having to reject every single character in the game. The game is entirely bisexual, which is surprising as the people who actually identify as bisexual is something like 2% of the population. And this is also not an aspect of the previous games. I'm not sure why Jaheira and Minsk were left out of the party. I have to wonder if the game creators felt they would be going too far by allowing the player to hook up with the old characters. But if that's the case, then why subject the player to this in the first place? Overall, it does diminish the adventuresome spirit, and having to literally turn down every single character can be a bit of a bummer. In my playthrough, I banged Lae'zel, then broke up with her, and agreed to settle down with Shadowheart, and also banged her. I give the narrative a 6 out of 10. The Baldur's Gate games are essentially a simulation of the core rules of Dungeons & Dragons. There are some differences between the tabletop game and this version of the game, mostly for the positive. Of course, the creators could not simulate every possible thing you might want to do in the game, but they do succeed in offering a very comprehensive array of options, if mostly combat-oriented. For the most part, you just need to know the rules of D&D to understand the rules of this game. That being said, it's a very complex game with a lot of options, which may be daunting for beginner players. As the game goes on, the battles get harder, with the player fighting hordes of enemies. A single battle can easily last several hours, as the game is turn-based and there are many characters. An option to speed up certain aspects of battle would have been nice. That being said, the game creators got rid of some of the more abstruse red tape which exists in the core rulebooks, in favor of offering a smoother experience. The result is that it is simpler to find builds which end up overpowering the characters. Characters are allowed to cast multiple leveled spells in a round, which can become a big boon, especially later on with a high level spellcaster. The combat rounds are heavily oriented towards whoever can make the most actions early on, so it's a big advantage to be able to kill off enemies really early in battle before they can attack. The rogues excelled here. Certain classes can attack multiple times, like the fighter. Multi-classing into 2 levels of fighter can give the player action surge, which is a good way for pretty much any build to add a couple actions to their round. I definitely recommend looking at builds in certain classes in order to maximize what they can do. Certain aspects of the game did fall short. Disguise Self never did seem to quite work for me. It changes the appearance of the characters, however, no one in the game ever actually fell for my disguises, and it didn't change the narrative at all when I tried to use it. I do like that they gave some of the more roleplay-y spells to the player basically for free with items such as Talk with Dead and Speak with Animals. These spells are really fun to use, but it's hard to justify taking them when those spell slots could go towards spells that could really help in battle, especially early on in the game. The shoving mechanic is way overpowered. You can literally just shove anyone into a pit, and they will just be dead. There is no reaction or anything. They can do it to you as well, which is so annoying. However, the game does allow the player to resurrect afterwards despite having no body. However, the game can be somewhat inconsistent about this mechanic, and once you come to rely on it, you may find you are in an area where you should be able to push someone off the edge, and it's just not allowed. Gust of Wind is another spell which I never seem to get to work quite right. It's supposed to be able to clear out gases and such, but it never did it for me. The gases just remained where they were. Overall, the creators did a good job of creating a cohesive narrative arc despite the many interwoven possible narratives the player could be in. However, sometimes the dialogue just doesn't make any sense, or the options don't quite match what the player should be saying at that time. It can get very confusing, especially in Act 3. In Act 3, I pretty much gave up trying to know what was going on and just had to look up where to go to continue the narrative. Some of the quest lines just didn't seem to continue. They unexpectedly died, or a quest point would have a very specific trigger, which is just something that I wouldn't have done, such as killing everyone in a building for some reason. I still have no idea what I was supposed to do at the fireworks store, and in my quest with Halsin to save Thaniel, Oliver just disappeared, making the quest unfinishable. Fortunately, he reappeared randomly later on in the game for unexplained reasons. Inconsistency was also an issue when playing parts of the game which involved a timer. In my battle protecting Halsin's portal in Act 2, for instance, the timer said I had to hold the ground for a certain number of rounds against a growing horde of undead. However, the game went through an entire extra cycle after the timer ended, during which the portal was destroyed and I had to restart. Using my knowledge of the timer now, when I went to the submarine level in Act 3, I believed I would have a number of rounds with one extra round after the timer counted down, to free the prisoners in the submarine. However, this time the timer ended as soon as it went to 0, and once again I had to restart. This encounter design also seems to over-rely on the player's ability to retry. In the same submarine instance, the Duke needs to be free within a certain amount of time. However, the map is unexplored the first time you go down. It's not possible to know where to go. What's more, the Duke is a slow runner and takes almost the entire clock time to reach the submarine. You have to free him by round 2 in order to give him enough time to get back. otherwise you'd need to teleport him, but you would need to be prepared for that. Overall, there is a distinct lack of clarity which becomes increasingly apparent as the game continues. It's a fun game, however, especially in Act 3. Outside information was generally required. I gave the gameplay a 9 out of 10. Baldur's Gate 3 is a completely ridiculous experience, though one definitely worth having if you have the patience to wade through the myriad issues you are bound to have in the game. It's hard to imagine a person who won't take offense to at least some of the material presented in the game as well, but hey, that's an M rating for you. The battles do get very hard and they can take a long time, and there are definitely some bugs in the gameplay, quests, and story. For a D&D simulator though, you probably can't do any better. I spent 135 hours playing this game, and I found that I was easily spending 2 to 3 times as long in my sessions without even getting tired. The game does present a somewhat simplified version of the D&D format, which allows the players to become somewhat overpowered. Then again, if everyone is overpowered, nobody is. I give the game 8.5 out of 10 and a fly swatter because you're going to have to swat these ravenous bisexual murder hobos away.